Hey, it's Mike and Arlen. The video that you're going to watch is something that we've been working on literally for weeks, a little bit at a time. It's complex, it's convoluted, and it's incredibly informational. That's the best word I can give for it. The intent is for you to become an informed healthcare consumer. And here in the Philippines, I think that's the most positive way to take care of your health care is to know something about how the system works. So let's talk about it.
I never got it, why'd you have to go? I guess this world's too slow for you. I think there's beauty in the gray, the cold, but you just want the gold. And there's no way I can beat it, cause I got no chance, no chance when it comes to her. She got the glitter and the fame, and I just wasn't enough.
I spent the better part of 40 years, 40 years in the healthcare field. Now, I've owned businesses unrelated to healthcare. I've had business investments unrelated to healthcare. I've had business investments that were part of healthcare. I've been in academic healthcare. I've had practices that are in academic healthcare. I've had practices that are in regular private practice healthcare and on staff at I don't know, about 25 different hospitals. And before you think I jump from place to place, recognize that in the U.S., being on staff at multiple hospitals for clinical applications are very usual and standard. That being said, I also spent 20 of those 40 years um, with let me try. I don't want to sound like a braggart. That's what I'm trying to avoid. All right. And I certainly don't want to paint an ugly picture. Let's just say I spent my final 20 years building an incredibly large physician practice. Okay. So we know this subject very well. And one of the things that we have done in the United States, and I am a huge patient advocate, I believe that patients come before dollars. That doesn't mean I don't charge for services, but I do believe patients come before that almighty dollar. Secondly, I also am a big advocate of patients being informed. And how do they get informed? And that's how we're going to start the first part. This is actually going to be multiple videos. I'm sorry. And I know for many of you, it may be boring. But let me tell you, before you even jump off, let me say this. If you're coming to the Philippines, if you're in the Philippines, odds are you're financing a large piece of your health care, if not all of it, out of your own pocket. And for those of you that are covered by insurance in the Philippines, we're going to give you some information about just how to deal with the questions you're going to bring up to those insurance companies. And finally, we're going to teach you how to actually evaluate the facilities, the people, and the physicians that you may choose to interact with. So let's go on. In the United States, we're going to talk about hospitals to begin with. And the reason I talk about hospitals to begin with is because hospitals are where the vast majority of practices, doctors interact. You know what? One of the best practices you can have in the U.S. is being a dermatologist. You're never going to get called into the hospital at 4 o'clock in the morning to see a patient. There's a couple others that limit it, and then there are others that are just full of vicious on-call routines. That being said, almost all doctors interface with hospitals. So, what are we going to look at? I mean, what makes it happen? Well, here's what you have to keep in mind. In the United States, we have what's called the Joint Commission on HealthCare Organizations, the JC, Joint Commission Accreditation Hospital Organization, JCAHO. Okay? Do not confuse that with the international organization that we're going to talk about later, called the Joint International. The Joint Commission in the United States, Joint Commission is so it is so strong that in order for a hospital to see a Medicare or a Medicaid patient, they must be in accreditation as a renewal, or they must have applied for the first time and be in the timeline, or they must be accredited. You don't pass accreditation, you don't get to see Medicare and Medicaid patients. And I'm going to tell you, every public hospital in the U.S. would go broke if it could not accept Medicaid and Medicare patients. Now, if you're in one of those states, like say Arizona, people in Arizona don't get Medicaid. Medicaid is money that the federal government uses to pay hospitals for people in low-income situations. In Arizona, the government pays that money to the state, and the state has its own quote-unquote Medicaid product. Okay? So, but all states essentially have it. Those dollars come from the feds. You can't get federal compensation at any of these hospitals unless they are accredited. Now, you're saying I'm in the Philippines. Who gives a shit? Well, I'm going to tell you why and what. Outside of the United States, and just so you know, to give you an idea, from start to finish, and I have done this, I don't know, 6, 8 times, start to finish, hospital accreditation takes between 3 and 8 months, because the hospital gets this huge packet of information, divvies it up amongst its individual departments, and then collates the data, and that has to be sent before the actual physical interviews and inspections. Now, there's Joint International. So, JCO in the U.S. is not a government agency. It's actually a not-for-profit agency. Joint International sits in the same state, same building that JCO sits in. It's in the same business park. I think it's in actually the same building as their headquarters. And they accredit international hospitals. The cost in the U.S., a typical 300-bed hospital, all right, contrary to what you will look up and see, I know because I've seen the checks, it's about $400,000 minimum. And the more complex the hospital is, the more expensive it is. That's about, I'm talking about minimum 300, 400 beds. Joint International's costs are less than $100,000. However, they pretty much mirror each other. It's like somebody from JCO quit, opened up his own company and took the playbook with them. I don't know. Have no idea. Okay? The point is they're very similar. And what does Joint Commission accreditation get you? Why is it important? And why is Joint International important? With one exception, and we'll go over that in just a minute, with one exception, it covers some of the things you, as a patient, really are needing to know. It covers physicians that are practicing within their board certified, fellowship trained areas. It covers the fact that physicians are on staff at certain hours, period. It covers the fact of what the average wait time is in emergent and non-emergent basis. And all of this data is got to be captured by a centralized data system, all right, a health information system, and submitted on the applications. Cheating these is very difficult to do. Now, the one thing that also happens is the delivery of care and the outcomes. Those things are also very much within your health informatics. Okay? But let's get to the one that sticks out to the side. The one that sticks out to the side is peer review. In the U.S., we have peer review. The Philippines does not have it in any of its accrediting body. Most hospital associations don't. Okay? Now, that is, there are some outliers to this, and I'm going to explain it. But peer review is where patient information is taken, and the diagnosis, and treatments, and outcomes, actually not even the outcomes, just the diagnostics and treatments, okay? They're put into a blind study. You don't get to see the patient's name. You don't get to see the referring physician's name, the treating guy's name. You don't get to see anything. And then the peer review committee looks at that and says, yes, this was appropriate. No, it was not. Now, it's my understanding that the 3 joint international hospitals here in the Philippines have an internal peer review system. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are a couple of other places that have it. But if you don't have peer review, if you don't have a blind method to criticize poor performance or poor treatment of patients, you may want to consider going somewhere else. With that being said, and with that being covered, let me also explain that it's your right to look that up. Now, I'm going to give you a website and show it to you where it'll list the hospitals that are Joint International accredited here in the Philippines. And it'll be in the links below. If you don't feel like going to the links, because I know this crap is so boring, but if you don't feel like going to the links, all right, to look and see, then it's St. Luke's, it's Makati Medical, and actually there used to be 4, but now there's only 3 listed this year. It used to be Asian Hospital or Chinese Hospital. I can't remember what it's called. And then there's a third one, a fourth one. I can't remember the name of it. But anyways, I think it might be St. Luke's Quezon, because there's 2 locations. But you'll have to go take a look. The point is they are Joint International accredited. Now, all of this starts to roll into what is this important to you for? It's important because there are standards set for the physicians. Not only are there standards set for the physicians, there are standards that are set for procedures. For instance, let's say you're going in for a stroke. You have 20 minutes from the time you walk in that door. Best practice is 20 minutes from the time you get rolled in that door before they start TPA. All right? You don't start TPA within 20 minutes, your odds of recovering from that stroke get cut in half. You don't start it within 40 minutes, your odds decrease to down to like 15% or something like that. I can't remember exactly how much. You get in a car accident and you come in and it's obvious, your blood pressure's down to nothing, your belly's bloated, you've got all these kind of problems. You've got internal bleeding. You need a CT scan of the abdomen with contrast stat. Requirement for emergency reports. You need to be able to get that patient done. Here's a perfect example. I don't talk about this much, but most of you may know this. I had a big ass heart attack in 2013. In fact, it was significant enough to put me in a wheelchair for 6 months to recover afterwards. All right? And it still took me another year to get to the point where I could walk 100 yards. From the time I got rolled into the ER, I had an exam. I had labs, 3 different sets of labs. I had blood gases. I had chest x-ray. I had a CT scan of the chest, abdomen, and pelvis. I had a cardiac catheterization, and I had therapeutic work. Let's just leave it at that. All of that was done and or initiated within 12 hours. You're not going to get that at hardly any facility, maybe 2 or 3 in all of the Philippines. And we're going to tell you later why. We're going to give you, this has got so much information that you need to pay attention to. So much information because you need to know before you have a problem or before your husband falls down and breaks his hip or before your wife has a heart attack or before one of your kids breaks an arm. Who are you going to call? It's kind of like Ghostbusters, okay? Who are you going to call? Which doctor are you going to ask for at the hospital? Are you going to say, hey, you know what? I want this orthopod. Now, they may set it temporarily at the hospital because that orthopod is not on call and won't be in until tomorrow or whatever, but a temporary set will work just as well. As for a hip, that's a different problem. Heart attack, that's where you got to start looking at the actual facilities itself. And not only that, but you got to look at the requirements for the people there that are taking care of you. I know this is a lot. It's boring and it's a long video, and I apologize. But this is really important information. We're going to give you all of it. Look, if you found this informative, if you found it interesting, please do subscribe. Do give us a thumbs up. Because before we go forward with everything, I want to see if we get at least some kind of response that's going to make it worth doing it. Thanks. We hope you have a great day.